Homeless child asks J.D. Vance for food. His response will warm your heart. The cold wind whipped through the streets of Cincinnati as J.D. Vance stepped out of his car. It was a brisk evening, the kind where even a thick coat couldn't entirely ward off the chill. Vance, the best-selling author of Hillbilly Elegy and a United States Senator, had just wrapped up a community meeting in one of the city's underprivileged neighborhoods. The event had been about addressing poverty and creating opportunities for struggling families, a cause close to his heart given his own turbulent upbringing. But before we dive into what happens next, I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from today? Drop a comment below and please like the video. Thank you. As he walked toward a small diner for a quick meal before heading home, his thoughts were preoccupied with the faces he had just seen. Young mothers, elderly veterans, teenagers with weary eyes. He felt the weight of their struggles and the immense responsibility of his position, but nothing could have prepared him for what was about to happen. Just as he reached the entrance of the diner, a faint voice called out from the shadows, "Mister, can you help me?" Vance turned to see a boy, no older than 10, standing on the sidewalk. His clothes were threadbare, his sneakers falling apart, and his face was pale from the cold. He had a small backpack slung over one shoulder, but it looked more like a pillowcase filled with odds and ends than something meant for school. The boy's eyes, however, were what struck Vance the most, big, brown, and brimming with both fear and hope. "Are you okay?" Vance asked, kneeling slightly to meet the boy's gaze. The child hesitated, as if unsure whether to trust him, then finally whispered, "I'm hungry. I haven't eaten all day." Vance's heart clenched. He glanced around, noticing the way the boy seemed to shrink into himself, as though expecting to be shooed away or ignored. It wasn't hard to imagine how many times he'd been overlooked by busy strangers rushing past. Vance saw himself in that boy, alone, vulnerable, and hungry, not just for food, but for kindness. "Come with me," Vance said gently, opening the door to the diner. The boy hesitated again, but eventually followed. The warmth of the diner washed over them as they stepped inside, the smell of sizzling bacon and freshly brewed coffee filling the air. They sat at a corner booth, away from prying eyes. The boy kept his head low, almost as if he didn't believe he belonged there. Vance handed him a menu, but the boy just stared at it, his hands trembling slightly. "Get anything you want," Vance said. "It's on me." The boy's eyes widened, and he looked up at Vance as if trying to confirm he wasn't joking. Slowly, he pointed to a simple cheeseburger on the menu. "Is that okay?" he asked timidly. Vance smiled. "You can get as many cheeseburgers as you want, and fries, and a milkshake, whatever you like." The boy ended up ordering a cheeseburger, fries, and a chocolate milkshake. When the food arrived, he ate quickly, almost too quickly, as if worried someone might take it away. Vance didn't press him for details about his life, knowing the boy needed to feel safe before opening up. As the boy ate, Vance gently asked, "Do you have a place to stay tonight?" The boy shook his head, chewing slowly. "Sometimes I stay in the shelter, but it's full tonight. Other times," he trailed off, looking out the window, "I just find a spot." Vance's chest tightened. He thought about his own childhood, growing up in a chaotic household with moments of deep insecurity. He'd been lucky to have his grandparents step in, but this boy didn't seem to have anyone. "I'm going to help you," Vance said firmly. "You don't have to do this alone anymore." The boy looked at him skeptically, as if he'd heard similar promises before. But Vance meant every word. As soon as the boy finished eating, Vance made a few phone calls. First, he contacted local social services to find temporary housing for the boy. Then he called a close friend who ran a nonprofit organization for at-risk youth. By the time they left the diner, there was a plan in motion to ensure the boy wouldn't spend another night on the streets. But Vance didn't stop there. Over the next few weeks, he visited the boy regularly, checking on his progress and helping him settle into a more stable environment. He discovered the boy's name was Marcus and that he loved drawing. One day, Vance brought him a sketch pad and colored pencils, encouraging him to explore his talent. Marcus began to open up, sharing bits and pieces of his life. He'd been on the streets for over a year after his mother passed away and his father disappeared. He'd learned to survive by scavenging and relying on the kindness of strangers, but those moments were few and far between. Vance couldn't shake the thought of how many other children like Marcus were out there, struggling in silence. Inspired by Marcus's resilience, Vance launched a new initiative in the Senate, aimed at combating child homelessness and hunger. He partnered with nonprofits, local businesses, and community leaders to create safe havens for children in need. He named the initiative Marcus's Promise, in honor of the boy who had reignited his passion for making a difference. The story of J.D. Vance and Marcus went viral, touching hearts across the nation. Donations poured in, volunteers signed up, and more children like Marcus began to find hope. Marcus himself became a symbol of resilience, often joining Vance at events to share his story. As years passed, Marcus thrived. With Vance's support and the help of his newfound community, he went back to school and eventually earned a scholarship to study art. At his high school graduation, Vance sat in the front row, beaming with pride. In his valedictorian speech, Marcus said, "I used to think the world was a cold, dark place, but one kind act showed me that there's still light and it's up to us to keep it shining." J.D. Vance's simple decision to help a hungry child had grown into a movement that changed countless lives, proving that sometimes the smallest gestures can create the greatest impact. And as Marcus hugged him after the ceremony, Vance couldn't help but feel that this was the most meaningful accomplishment of his life. The warmth of that hug stayed with J.D. Vance long after Marcus's graduation ceremony had ended. It wasn't the kind of accolade he was used to receiving in his political career or his public life. It was far deeper. It felt like a piece of his own wounded past had healed in that moment. But Marcus's story was only the beginning. That night, as Vance sat in his study, reflecting on everything that had transpired over the past few years, he realized how much more work needed to be done. Marcus was thriving now, but for every Marcus, there were thousands of children still out there, falling through the cracks. He opened his laptop and began drafting a detailed plan, one that would go beyond his initial Marcus's Promise initiative. He envisioned something bigger, an interconnected network of shelters, educational programs, mentorship initiatives, and trauma counseling centers aimed specifically at homeless and at-risk youth. He called it the Foundation for Future Stars. Vance reached out to leaders in various fields: educators, psychologists, social workers, and entrepreneurs. He even enlisted celebrities and influencers to help bring visibility to the issue. But what truly set his plan apart was the inclusion of people like Marcus. Vance believed that those who had lived the experience of homelessness could provide insights and solutions that no policy expert could. Marcus, now a college student studying fine arts, became one of the Foundation's most passionate advocates. During his school breaks, he would travel with Vance to speak at events, fundraisers, and community centers. His artwork, inspired by his journey, became a powerful symbol of hope. One of his most famous pieces, titled "The Hand That Reached Out," depicted a small, trembling hand being grasped firmly by a larger, steadier one. The painting was auctioned for charity, raising over $500,000 for the foundation. As Marcus's life continued to blossom, he never forgot the night that changed everything. He often recounted the simple act of kindness Vance had shown him at the diner. "He didn't treat me like a problem to be solved," Marcus would say. "He treated me like a person." Meanwhile, Vance's political career took on a new dimension. Though his policies had always focused on economic revitalization and family support, his newfound commitment to addressing homelessness and childhood poverty became his defining cause. He worked tirelessly to secure bipartisan support for legislation that would increase funding for housing programs, expand access to mental health services, and improve foster care systems. Of course, not everyone supported his efforts. Critics accused him of using Marcus's story for political gain or argued that the government shouldn't be involved in such initiatives. But Vance stayed resolute. Every time the criticism weighed him down, he would think of Marcus's shy smile on that cold night and remember why he had started this journey. The foundation grew rapidly. Shelters were established in cities across the country, offering more than just a bed and a meal. These centers became hubs of opportunity, where children could access tutoring, career counseling, and extracurricular activities. One of the most innovative aspects of the program was a mentorship initiative that paired children with adults who had overcome similar struggles. Marcus, naturally, became a mentor himself. One of the kids he worked with was a 12-year-old girl named Tara. Like Marcus, she had lost her mother and had been left to navigate the streets alone. Tara was fiercely independent, reluctant to accept help, and quick to assume the worst in people. But Marcus saw through her tough exterior, recognizing the same pain he had once carried. Through countless conversations and shared moments of creating art together, Marcus began to break down Tara's walls. He taught her how to channel her feelings into her sketches and paintings, much like he had. Slowly but surely, Tara began to trust him and others. Within a year, she was back in school and even won an art competition for a piece she'd titled, "Home is a Feeling." As Marcus watched Tara walk across the stage at her own school awards ceremony, he found himself tearing up. He couldn't help but think about how his life had come full circle. This is what JD saw in me, he thought, and now I get to see it in someone else. Meanwhile, JD Vance was preparing for his next big move. Inspired by the overwhelming success of the foundation, he decided to write a follow-up book. But this time it wasn't about his own life. It was about the lives of the children who had been transformed through the initiative. Titled The Stars We Saved, the book was a collection of stories like Marcus's, Tara's, and countless others. The book became a bestseller, sparking a national conversation about homelessness and poverty in America. More importantly, it inspired countless individuals to take action in their own communities. Donations to the Foundation for Future Stars skyrocketed, and new programs were launched, including one specifically for young mothers and another aimed at helping teenagers transition into adulthood. Through it all, JD and Marcus remained close. Their bond had evolved into something akin to family. Marcus would often visit JD's home, spending time with his wife and children. They'd laugh, share meals, and reminisce about how far they'd both come. One summer evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Marcus turned to JD and said, "You didn't just save me, you gave me a purpose." JD smiled, his eyes glistening. "You gave me one too," he replied. The legacy of that chance encounter on a cold Cincinnati night continued to ripple outward, touching lives in ways neither of them could have imagined. Marcus's art would go on to grace galleries and inspire millions, while JD's foundation grew into a cornerstone of hope for the nation's most vulnerable children. Together, they proved that even the smallest act of kindness can set off a chain reaction, changing the world one life at a time. And in their hearts, they both knew that the greatest impact wasn't in the numbers or the accolades. It was in the simple, profound act of believing in someone when no one else did.